Today on the Operatives Podcast, we spoke to Dr. Agarwal about his pivot from oncology to longevity and what makes his longevity clinic unique. Hope you enjoy. What is your overall career journey from like a young man to becoming a doctor and practicing medicine?
Yeah, everyone's story is so unique, and I'm not gonna claim that mine is any is special by any means. But like most people who became doctors who went into medicine, I wanted to do something that was important. I wanted to help people, and being born as a South Asian American, my parents gave me only three possibilities of success. Doctor, engineer, or lawyer. And my dad would say, Manoj, you can do anything you want as long as you're a doctor. And he would tell my brother, hey, Sumit, you can do whatever you want as long as you're a cardiologist. So my brother didn't become a cardiologist, but we both became doctors, and parents are very happy. Um, but I'll tell you, when I was first in medical school, I grew up in inner city New York, and we didn't really do winter sports. I got invited to my first ski trip, and most of my friends were snowboarders. So naturally, I snowboarded. We went up to Vermont from Brooklyn, and I must have fell a couple hundred times in the mountains. Fine. Come back. I'm 2 blocks away from where I live, right behind the hospital, and I'm walking with my suitcase, and a woman runs a red light, and next thing I know, I'm on the floor. And that
Mm,
defined my medical career more than I ever knew it would at that moment, because I was disabled for 2 years.
mm,
And it shattered my dreams of becoming a surgeon. I wanted to become a trauma surgeon, believe it or not, in the US military, and I couldn't stand very long. So instead, I set about a journey to find things that I could do that were related to my hands, um, but didn't require me to move a lot. And I discovered radiation oncology. And I was fascinated by the ability to heal people using invisible beams and be able to help people in a time of crisis. I knew early on that I didn't want to treat the sniffles. And that's also a joke on my family because my wife literally treats the sniffles as an allergist. But I wanted to do really important work. And that is what brought me to oncology and radiation oncology. And I practiced that, including residency. It's been 16 years since I entered the field of radiation oncology, and it's been a tremendous um, opportunity, tremendous growth path, and I really have enjoyed it. But I'll say that, for the listeners of the podcast, the viewers of the podcast, you may resonate with this. Once when a patient comes into my office as a radiation oncologist, at that point, it's a little too late, right? Your cancer has already been diagnosed, it's been worked
mm,
up, and I am here to treat that. And over time, you'd see repeatable patterns. And over time, like any craft, you get really good at what you do.
mm,
And I think the beauty of medicine is the art form that you get from doing this repeatedly over time and knowing that your technical skill, you're very competent in that technical component, but the human element is naturally refined over time. And I really feel for patients, and I really feel for patients who don't have to be in that room. And if you think about it, 40, maybe even up to 50% of cancers are related to your lifestyle, which
mm.
also in turn means that potentially 40 to 50% of recurrences may be related to lifestyle, but there was no space for that in the narrative. And I wanted to have that narrative, and I did have that narrative, but the system didn't allow me to do so. There was no time for it. I'd run over my meeting times, and administrators didn't like that. And ultimately, I said, I got to get ahead of disease. And the more that I learned about getting ahead of cancer, the more you realize that all these systems are interconnected. The risk factors developing a malignancy are the same as developing cardiovascular disease and developing metabolic disease and dementia. So we put it all together, and what you really have is this field of medicine that wants to get ahead of disease way before it begins. And that's where I discovered longevity medicine. And that's when I said, this is the thing that I need to do to really help people.
Yeah. I'm super interested in longevity as well. I'm at a point in my life where I'm not necessarily actually very healthy, but I'm interested in longevity and all these things. Um, so what are you doing in the space of longevity currently?
Yeah, great question. So I think when people think of longevity medicine, they think of some extremes. They think of, these celebrities who are biohacking.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
think of quick fixes, right? We're wired as human beings to want to take the easy path. But when I think of longevity medicine, it really comes down to creating systems and a system that one can follow to make the better choice a default choice, to wire that in it and to kind of rewire things slowly over time and really meet the person where they are. Because ultimately, when when we talk to someone outside of medicine, when you want to help someone who's struggling, that person already knows what to do, right? If someone wants to lose weight, we tell them how to lose weight, they're not going to appreciate that. They know how to
yeah,
lose weight. It's really about kind of connecting the dots and removing some of the friction to enable them to have that behavior that they really feel that they need. And I think that's where I see longevity medicine being. I think there's always room for tests, but that shiny test doesn't mean anything if you don't act on it. And that's why I don't do consultations. I only do memberships because I did a couple of one-off consultations and it never leads to action. It just becomes another thing that sits on your desk or takes a space in your hard drive.
yeah. That's very interesting. We've had a lot of longevity doctors on the show, and each one of them, like their journey to longevity was sort of different. It was like you're an oncologist. We had a guy who was family medicine. We had a guy who was a chiropractor, and then he started
Mhm.
longevity. Um, it's very interesting. What do you think? Longevity is kind of a cash pay thing currently. Uh,
Mhm.
what do you think is like the future of longevity medicine in the U.S.? Because it's really taking off.
Yeah, yeah. I think right now, the way it is, I shouldn't say right now, but maybe if we went time 2 years ago, it was really just for the elites, who had access to capital, who had access to concierge type care, who understood concierge type care. And I think more and more, as even folks like yourself who are young, don't necessarily need to worry about your health at some point, are understanding the value of investing early on. So I think once now that AI has continues to evolve. I think for the masses, I think having AI assisted plans, AI assisted coaching, having that in your pocket, having nudges with periodic, healthcare professional check-in. Does it? I think I'm not saying it has to be a doctor because a doctor, I think I actually do personally think a doctor should be overseeing the plan.
Hmm.
But in terms of making sure the plan is being rolled out and followed, you can have a suite of people that are involved there. So to answer your story short, I think there's going to be levels of care, just like there are in healthcare now. There'll be, you know, kind of, um, kind of. I would say mediocre. I would say mediocre longevity that is AI based for the most part,
Hmm.
because I do really feel like you need human touch, and I think that healthcare practitioner touch really means a lot. So there'll be different layers, and I think even within the AI space, if you have quarterly check-ins with your doctor or whatever, that elevates it rather than just saying, hey, some tests, and here's this AI algorithm that's going to take care of you.
I think that there's a market, and I know that there's a couple of people attempting to fulfill it, of like a longevity kind of community. Like it's a clinic and it's a community, but it's overrun by like a doctor, and you're
Mm-hmm,
paying a
mm-hmm.
membership. You've got like a community aspect to it, and then you have a doctor overseeing it, and you're getting everything. I know a couple of people are attempting to do it, but I think that's kind of where it's going
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah, I agree. And community is so important. I mean, there's literature on it. I'm sure someone else in your talk has spoke about the Harvard longitudinal study showing that being connected to people that care about you, that you care about, having that really broad and narrow community is probably the best predictor of longevity and happiness you can have.
Hmm. Yeah. For me, it was kind of like I started investing. a little bit. And I was looking at like compound interest, and I was like, huh, if you had a portfolio that was compounding, you would, eventually it would turn into a decent sum of money. But throughout your life, like all this investment, all this compounding is kind of useless if you're not healthy. Your body kind of has to be in good shape in order to reap the benefits of anything, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the same principle of compounding interest that you apply to your finances, you apply to your health. By
Yeah.
making those investments early on, it will create that body and mind that remains resilient to have those experiences as you age. And I think that's important for many reasons. It's obviously important because everyone wants to live a long and healthy life, but also because our society has this kind of golden vision of what retirement should look like. And most people, a lot of people, I shouldn't say most people, because I think a lot of people are becoming more self-aware. Working really hard and then all of a sudden saying, "I'm done and let me live the golden life." At which point your health is gone, and those
Yeah.
experiences that one could have had early on are no longer available to you. So it brings another pillar of health span that I call joy span, and it's not living long just for longevity's sake, but living long to have that abundance of well-being that you accumulate through experiences throughout your life. When it's appropriate in your life too.
Yeah. So let's talk about then the clinic. It's called Blue Wealth, correct?
That's right.
So I want to become a patient. What kind of happens? Can you run that process out for me?
Yeah, sure. So what I really pride myself on is we do keep it pretty small. So we have currently in the early years we restricted to 25 members, and we've recently expanded to 25. So there's some space to onboard some new patients.
Hmm.
We start off with our onboarding, the collecting of medical records and forms and all that good stuff, which is really comprehensive and very thorough. Because when I meet somebody, I don't want to sit there and kind of go through your history because I think that's a big waste of time when I
Yeah.
can collect that ahead of time and then clarify with you in person, and then paint a narrative of what your life arc was and is. And then we meet in person, or it can be telemed. I have some patients that live in other states and they prefer to do telemed, and that's fine. I always encourage in person, and we sometimes do have patients from Canada or Mexico that fly in for the office visit. So there's no replacement for an eye-to-eye interaction, but we also arrange for testing. So assuming they're coming in for a physical visit, we sit down and we have a 3 hour initial visit. So it's kind of the longest time you're going to spend with a doctor outside of socializing
Why does it take 3 hours?
because it's so personal. It's because I sit there,
Mm.
I really get to know you as a person, and we walk through certain exercises beyond just, what is your health like? It's also like getting deep, really deep, building trust, talking about why it is you want to live long, who it
Hmm.
is you want to live for, you know, because ultimately when times get rough, when I don't know, when you're sleep deprived, you're traveling a red eye, and all you see is a big plate of pasta in front of you, and whatever. Not saying you should never eat pasta, but what are you going to do when times are tough, right? You got to dig
Yeah.
in. You got to dig into that. So if I can identify what it is that you are really striving for deep down inside, multiple layers beyond that superficial answer, then that's when you actually adhere to the plan. And then we also identify your top drivers because I think healthcare can get very complicated very quickly. But I want to make sure we prioritize and make sure what we do is reasonable and achievable. And of course, we have tests that are done at the visit too. We do functional assessment, we do blood work, we do some imaging as well. So it all kind of gets baked in.
We had a doctor on called Dr. Earl Priest, who has a longevity clinic in Texas, and he was walking us through all the tests, like this, like wacky, zany tests. And I'm a marketing guy, so my first thought was, if I were marketing a longevity clinic, I'd be like, "Hey guys, I'm here at the clinic. Let's check out all the tests," and I would show people all the tests. Can you walk us through all the tests? I know there's like a bunch of them. I can't even think of all
Yeah,
of them
yeah.
off the top
I
of my
mean,
head.
everyone does things a little bit differently. Everyone's focus is a bit different too. So I'm not saying my focus is the absolute best. There could be others that I could learn from. So testing wise, do gut micronutrient microbiome testing, I should say, gut microbiome testing. We use a platform that actually integrates AI into it as well.
Hmm.
In the beginning, I was using kind of a tried and true method that a lot of people use in integrated medicine space, but it's very analog. And there's papers coming out every single day on the microbiome, and it's impossible as a person to continue to stay up on that. So the really we like about this interface is that it continuously updates every couple of days all literature in the microbiome space and associations. So it becomes kind of like a breathing document. Now, of
Hmm.
course, your gut microbiome does change over time, so it's not going to be like your ongoing blueprint, but it really is super personalized based on the intake and the context that the patient gives and the testing that comes out of that. So they take that home. Obviously, don't collect that in the office. Although, like, if they have to go, they go. We do genetic testing as well, and it's beyond kind of your traditional genetics that you might get in the healthcare setting that just tests a couple of genes. It really goes deep into metabolism and it goes into your physiology. It really does give a lot of actionable information. Um, so with those, that's done in the office. Let's think what else that we have. We do, biologic age testing as well, and it's beyond just a global score. I like looking at distinct organ systems. And the way I explain that is, if you when you think about when a person dies, it's an awkward conversation to have, but we're talking longevity, and we're ultimately all going to die.
Yeah, fair.
Typically, don't just die because our whole body breaks down. We typically die when one or two organ systems lag behind.
Hmm.
So if you can identify the organ systems that are lagging and you make that your priority, then you are removing the weakest chain to the link.
Hmm.
We have that. We have micronutrient testing as well. Most people are deficient in several micronutrients. So that is done as well. I do a sterile panel. Most people have cholesterol issues. I want to see where that issue is coming from.
Hmm.
And then the whole biomarker panel, a lot of people probably have overlap in the biomarker panel, like 100 plus biomarkers that they get sent off to get done. And then we give them some devices as well, some smart devices, so we can monitor them remotely.
How important are smart devices, you think? I don't have one currently. I have
Mhm.
an Aura ring my friend gave me, but I haven't turned it on. Should I
Yeah,
be turning that on now? How important is it?
I think it really does depend on your goals. It depends on whether you think the data you're going to get is actionable, because data is useless unless you do something about it. And I think that's been a challenge sometimes where people want to get more and more devices and get the next iteration or next version of something, but they haven't acted on the information that they actually have. So in general, I think it's useful. I think it's nice for people to know, for example, what their sleep is like and to identify barriers and influences on their sleep, quality, their sleep scores, things of that nature. I think that's a nice baseline. And the other baseline for someone who just didn't want to, get in deeper, could get super deep into things would be, I think, just knowing your steps would be a good baseline too. I
Hmm.
think most people significantly significantly overestimate their steps. So when they actually look at it, then they might get off their butts a bit more.
I always like to ask this to longevity doctors, and sometimes it's a little different, but it's usually kind of like the same but different. I ask like, okay, what should I be doing for longevity? Usually they say, good sleep, don't smoke, don't drink alcohol. But other than that, like, what do you suggest I should be doing, or anyone should be doing for longevity?
Yeah, so I think that's a solid foundation. I think so basically you said two don'ts and one do, right? Do sleep well
Do
and don't
sleep,
do
yeah.
these bad
Don't
things.
smoke,
I
don't
think
drink.
that's a nice solid thing, right? But I think one of the most underrated things is stress management. And that goes back to what you just mentioned about a wearable too, because you may not understand, you may not realize that you're stressed, and some stress is good. We're not saying we should never be stressed, but you want to be, this kind of this healthy level of stress. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at your order ring or you look at, your Whoop device or whatever it is, it'll give you an idea of your stress. And you'll be like, oh man, like I was really stressed today. Um, because I think the silent killer really is stress. You can have, these athletes, you can have people who are look good on the surface who die just like that in their 50s. And they're all stressed out.
Mm,
Stress is the absolute killer. Um, so I think really getting, and I'm not making I'm making that a negative association. Don't be stressed. But on the flip side, also, when you look at the positive psychology literature, then I studied that when I was at Penn, is we look at the field of psychology as disease or the absence of disease, but we're not just trying to all get to zero or neutral. We're trying to actually thrive and be positive.
mhm.
So the bigger picture here is the mental health aspect and having having friendships, connection, doing things that give you a sense of purpose, um, give you a sense of achievement, um, you know, that give you joy, that positive aspect that really works as well.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this myself because I saw on Twitter that how important it is to manage stress to be a successful businessman or probably even a successful doctor, for example. I mean, if you're stressed out all the time, you're probably not a very good surgeon if you're nervous and stressed out.
That's right.
But stress is kind of, if you have stress, it might be because you're doing something important and you're doing something big. Whereas maybe I could not live a very stressed out life, but I'm kind of just relaxing. I'm not doing anything
Mhm.
important,
Right.
which is kind of, in some Eastern philosophies, the true life, the middle path, right? You don't want to be
Right.
that. Um, what do you think, like, about this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Excuse me. Yes, I think we all want to achieve. We all want to strive for something better. Human beings are unique in that we're willing to accept pain for future gain.
Mm-hmm.
Any other animal is not going to be able to process that. Their prefrontal cortex is too small. They're activating their limbic system or their reptilian brain, right? They're reacting and avoiding pain at all costs. But we will sit there, we'll deprive ourselves of sleep. We will take on things that punish us because we see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really comes down to find that balance. And I'll tell you, as someone who was addicted to success and striving, I think a lot of high performing people, a lot of doctors are addicted to success and external validation, which was something I had to, by the way, process myself when I left academic medicine. Um, but the answer is different for everyone. We of course don't want to just be laying on a couch all day. We're not gonna kind of embrace that hippie mentality of hey, just do everything if it feels good and don't if it doesn't feel good. Um, but everyone's path is different. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't answer that for the individual, but you got to find out what it is that brings you that purpose and gets you to that place you want to be. But at the same time, society has that moving goalpost for us. So you achieve that thing that you think is going to make you happy, and then you're not happy anymore, right? You keep on going and going and going until you reach the end of the later of your life. You're like, what did I do this all for? Um, so that's my answer to that.
So I kind of want to spend the last couple of minutes of the podcast to maybe touch upon some of your like projects that you're involved with, if that'd be something you're interested in. I know you're doing some AI stuff. Maybe you want to chat about that.
Mhm. Sure. I mean, I'll tell you, as now that I've been doing this longevity for about 3 years or so, when you're in large medicine and you're in a hospital, academic medicine, whatever you want to call it, you're in a system that's already built for you. And the hardest part when you start your own thing initially is the lift of knowing what to do and how to create a business. And then once you start doing the doctoring part becomes native. But as I've grown, I've personally struggled a bit with operations.
Mm-hmm.
So, my goals for 2026 is to create a more smooth operating system for myself to protect my time as a physician, for efficiency, for better delivery for the clients, for my team, for my coaches. Um, so, right, my current project is really leveraging AI to create better operations for the business. And one thing I've learned is the power of of finding the right people. There was a book called Who Not What, I believe it's called. I might be messing that up, but it's a great book. I suggest you take a look at it by essentially saying that we are wired to think of solutions and act on those solutions, but many
Mhm.
times you find the right person to do it for you and you offload that. So that is something that I'm currently working on, and I have an AI coach, and that's been incredible.
Mm. And what about just in the world of oncology in general?
Man, that I can talk hours on that. It's such an exciting time to be an oncologist. And I'll say, it sounds weird to say, but I only do oncology part-time because I do this longevity as well. I have a separate business, by the way, in prostate cancer. I've treated mostly prostate cancer for most of my career. So we have a separate one that I could potentially talk more on this podcast about at a later time. So investing in access to that particular treatment called prostate brachytherapy, where we put
Mhm.
radioactive seeds in the prostate to cure men with prostate cancer, less invasive, less downtime. But as a whole, the field is moving so quickly. We're really helping people a lot more than we were able to before. So it's an exciting time to treat. But it's also an exciting time to get ahead of that as well.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Agarwal. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben.